Hi, I'm Jen, and this video was not filmed in front of a live studio audience. Quick reminder here at the top that this is an inclusive space where Black Lives Matter and we are anti-Asian hate. That means that you are safe here in the video with me and in the comments below, where hate speech of any kind will not be tolerated. Please let us know if there's anything we can do to make our content more inclusive or accessible by sending me an email or leaving a comment down below. When I was in high school, I had the best English teacher. He was actually a writing and English teacher, and his name was Mr. Kubnek. If I haven't mentioned him on this channel yet, that is an egregious oversight. He is literally responsible for where I am today, both geographically and career-wise, and he's probably responsible for about 70% of my self-confidence. He was the kind of teacher that didn't really dig curriculums, and so he would very frequently bring in stuff for us to read and watch that was not expected. He really loved to teach character development by showing us C-list movies from Saturday afternoon TV, and also television shows like Northern Exposure and the musical Pippin. He deserves, honestly, a whole separate channel, but today I'm just gonna give big ups to Mr. Kubnek for inspiring me to watch TV shows with an eye for character development. That's where this video came from. Today's video is actually about the 80s sitcom Cheers and why it's a great show for writers to watch. Cheers is one of those shows a lot of people agree is a great show. It ran for 11 seasons from 1982 to 1993, and over the course of its airing, the show was nominated for 111 Emmys. It won 28 of those and was nominated for 31 Golden Globes, of which it won 6. It also won a GLAAD Media Award for its first season episode about homophobia. The show inspired the spin-off Frasier. Yes, Frasier is a spin-off, which also went on to run for 11 seasons of its own. Cheers is still regarded as one of the best comedies in television history. By the time the series finale aired, it's estimated that almost half of the American public tuned in to watch it. So what makes it so great? For those of you unfamiliar, Cheers is an all-American sitcom about people in a bar. That is the premise. The characters are what bring the show alive. Sam Malone, a former relief pitcher for the Red Sox, owns the bar named Cheers and runs it even though he's 3 years sober. His employees are Ernie Coach Pantuso, who is an older, now retired baseball coach, hence the nickname, and Carla Tortelli, a single mother of 4 with a very short fuse. Eventually, Diane Chambers joins the ranks, and by eventually I mean by the end of the pilot episode, spoiler alert, and she becomes a major love interest for Sam. The two have an on-again, off-again relationship that is basically the thrust of the plot for a lot of the show. A lot of people reference like classic Sam and Diane relationships as a pretty classic pop culture hallmark. The bar has a regular clientele, the most frequent of whom are Norm Peterson, who often stays until final call, and Cliff Clavin, a know-it-all mailman who is always in his uniform. The pilot episode is titled Give Me a Ring Sometime, and it kicks off the plot of the show. College student Diane Chambers arrives with her fiance, Professor Sumner Sloan. I don't want to get started on how messed up that relationship is. They arrive at Cheers around opening time. Sumner has impulsively proposed to Diane, and they intend to elope in Barbados the next morning. However, Sumner has his grandmother's antique ring still with his ex-wife, and he insists that he needs to bring it with him to Barbados in order for them to get properly married. Diane's anxiety about the whole situation is apparent from their first exchange. And while Sumner goes to retrieve the ring, she sits at the bar, reads her book, tries to mind her own business as the night unfolds around her. 30-year-old spoiler alert, by the end of the episode, Sumner has clearly abandoned her for his ex-wife, and so Sam offers her a job waitressing, which she accepts. By modern TV standards, this is not a very complicated plot, not a very complicated backstory for any of the characters. It's just a bar in Boston with a bunch of people living their lives. The simplicity of the plot and the complexity of the characters is actually what makes it a really great study for writers. It has a lot in common with theater. By design, most of the show takes place on one set, the main bar area. And as the show goes on, they start spending time in the back room of the bar, Sam's office, Diane's apartment, but for the most part, they don't leave the orbit of Cheers. Limiting the sets means that drama often unfolds in real-time chunks. Characters are either at work or they're at the bar to avoid something else in their lives. So they don't really have the option of leaving the space. They're forced to deal with whatever problem arises right on camera. Scene breaks are relegated to commercial breaks. Drama unfolds, then time passes in a relatively natural way. For all its problems, and there are many that I may make a whole separate video about, this is something I also really like about The Office. There are restrictions on where the characters can go, or else the documentary crew doesn't catch it. So there's kind of a ticking time bomb on all of the problems that they need to solve. Otherwise, it's 5 o'clock and I've started to gather my things. When characters are limited by location and action takes place off screen, it has to be reported back to the characters when they return to that setting. This happens in the pilot of Cheers. When Sumner disappears at the beginning of the episode, we actually learn more from his absence than we do when he's on screen. When he's there, it's a fairly info-dumpy, slanted, arrogant version of events, whereas when he's gone, we get a more honest perspective of things. Limiting the setting also helps guide us towards which characters are important and which ones aren't. Because we get to see what's happening to Sam and Diane while Sumner and his ex-wife are off screen, we're subconsciously being told which characters are important and which ones may not be around after the pilot episode. So how does a show about random people in a bar last for 11 seasons? The plot might be simple, but the characters are pretty complex. Of course, as the theme song states, sometimes you wanna go where everybody knows your name. Everybody knows everybody's business in Cheers, so it doesn't really make for great exposition-y dialogue that's believable. I'm sure I've mentioned before that I'm from New England, but when I started watching Cheers, I was actually a little homesick, and it honestly warmed me right up. Even Cliff's thick Boston accent had me longing for a trip north. I have a lot of dumb and fake grudges. I don't talk to Kevin Bacon. I don't trust people who drive Audis. While I would never root for the Red Sox, probably even if my life depended on it, I definitely miss the camaraderie of living in New England, and like a show set in Boston absolutely sparked that. I think it was actually more about living in the same place that you were born and where you know the deal. I love a group of people who know their roots and know each other's dumb and fake grudges, and there's something about a local sports team that just brings people together. Without introducing Diane in the pilot episode, this would just be a show about people who all root for the Red Sox and know each other's business, and who cares? Because she shows up and she's not part of that camaraderie, she has to be told things like Sam's history with baseball and the fact that he's sober even though he owns a bar. And it's through her eyes that we watch the regular rhythm of the night unfold. So the introduction of a character like Diane is what makes exposition feel more natural. Without that sort of disconnect, everyone's like, yeah, no, we know we used to play for the Red Sox. We know that you've been sober for 3 years. Like, why are you telling us things that we already know about you? This ties back to the sort of on-screen, off-screen situation. Exposition has to do more than just explain what happened off-screen. Otherwise, it becomes an info dump. A perfect example is actually a parallel that runs through the pilot. When Diane and Sumner are describing their courtship and his proposal, they're very starry-eyed about it and very impressed with each other. And they're using names of famous poets and quoting famous poetry, and Sam has little to no reaction to absolutely any of it, except to crack jokes and be sarcastic and pour drinks. On the flip side, later on, when everyone is talking about Sam's history with baseball and whether or not he was a great ball player, she kind of just wants to get back to reading her book. And while everyone else at the bar is excited about Sam and his baseball history, she doesn't even know what horsehide is. So in these moments, not only is the dialogue important, but also the body language and the actions of the characters. So if you're going to sit down and study Cheers, or whatever show, movie, book, short story you want to study, here are some things that you should keep track of while you are doing so. So nothing in the pilot episode of Cheers goes to waste. I went through this episode a couple of times, and the last time that I did it, I went through with a little chart and started keeping notes of what we learn about each character. I observed props, costumes, body language, and action, in addition to the actual dialogue of the show. And as it turns out, you get a ton of information about all of the main cast just from the pilot episode. In fact, I'm going to put a picture up of my spreadsheet about Sam right here. All of that is just from 23 minutes of TV. If all of this was explained through exposition, it would literally just be a monologue of Sam telling his life, and it probably wouldn't be 23 minutes long. It would just be like 15 minutes of boring. You wouldn't care because it would all just be one person talking. But because it's exposed through props, through the way that he interacts with other people, you get a really good feeling of who that character is and where he fits in this world that's being built. So if you're struggling to develop characters in your writing, I highly suggest sitting down with a pen and paper and doing some research. Follow along with the pilot episode of The Office, I guess. Or think about all the things you can learn about Steve Rogers just from the first Avenger. Obviously, this is a little bit different with a written text, but you can still pull out things like character description or knowing things about the narrator, the fact that we're only getting third-person omniscient. In any Harry Potter book, so we don't actually know what Ron and Hermione are doing in their free time. Similarly, you can look at how characters talk about each other and whether or not that changes depending on who they're talking to. You can have a character who's manipulative tell one person one story and tell another person a completely different version of events in order to control the narrative. If you were to watch the pilot episode of Cheers and ask Sam about his first impressions of Diane versus Carla's first impressions of Diane, you would get two very different descriptions of the same woman. And because the pilot is so tightly written, you could probably sit down and write those two descriptions. In order to do some clean writing of your own, make sure that you're not wasting exposition. Make sure that you aren't exposing information using the same technique over and over and over again. We find out that Sam has been sober for 3 years because of dialogue, because of props, because of the actions that he takes. And we know that he's maybe not super comfortable talking about it because he's incredibly forthcoming when he's flirting with women and when he's talking about other elements of his life. But when he starts talking about his baseball career and his drinking, he turns to joking and he clams right up and becomes super humble. If you're interested in seeing all of the observations that I made from the pilot episode of Cheers and getting a template that you can use in order to do this with whatever media you want to, you can find a link to my Patreon down below. Patron memberships start as low as $1 a month. If this video has been helpful or interesting in any way, please give me a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button down below. You can also hit the bell, which I think is over here, in order to get notified every time there's new video content on this channel. For the month of July, we're going to do weekly vlogs going along with Camp NaNoWriMo 2.0, so get ready for that. And as always, if you have questions or comments, you can leave them down below or shoot me an email. My link is in the description. I'm going to go because I have the Cheers theme song stuck in my head. Please let me know if you have a favorite sitcom from like when you were a baby, or if you only watch new TV. I don't know, that would be weird, but sure, go for it. That's all I got, you guys. As always, stay safe and stay healthy. I'll see you next time. Bye!
Are you always this articulate?
Hercules. My name is Hercules.
As a kid, I definitely thought this whole TV show was about Norm, because I'm pretty sure I've seen like compilations of him walking into the bar and everyone cheering for him.
Afternoon, everybody. No!
Anyway, it was very confusing to me when I started actually watching it, that I was like, he's just a patron. Like, he's just a side character. I don't know. That can be your sting at the end of the video. Whatever.